This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Tuesday, January 2nd, 2018. Happy New Year, everyone. This is like, wow, a new year. So I've got two guests this week. This is super exciting and special. I have Mr. Jason Howell of All About Android. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Hey, Miriam. How are you doing? It's so great to join you here finally.
Yeah, finally have you on. But more importantly, in good old school return to form, I have Sean Cooper, who's a contributor at Engadget and used to do the Engadget Mobile Podcast with me here on the show. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, it's been a long time. It's odd to hear you struggling over 2018. It's still strange to say. It's only a couple days old.
I know. Like, I just had to think about that twice. Anyway, so, CES is coming up. It's weird, actually, that we have a podcast before CES in the first week of the year, because usually CES is starting this week. But they didn't, because January 1st was Monday, I guess. And so I'm going to be heading there. I know that, I don't know if Sean, you're going. I know that Jason, you're not.
No, I'm not going.
I am not.
Ow.
You're not, Sean, this year.
No.
But you know what? That doesn't matter, because there's been a bunch of rumors about CES, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we're going to see there, what you expect to see there, at least, remotely, by reading the news. But more important, what should we be looking forward to in 2018? And maybe your thoughts on what really you dug and enjoyed in 2017. So maybe start with you, Jason. What are you expecting at CES?
Well, I mean, I've been to CES a number of times, and I haven't been the last. This would probably be my third or fourth year in a row where I haven't been to CES, and I will say, I miss the camaraderie aspect of it. But
that's the best part, right?
That's kind of the best part of being there, and it's kind of a bummer to not get that. But then the daily grind of everything, it can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you're covering mobile, because like we were talking about prior to starting the recording, there's not a whole lot of phones announcement stuff that happens at CES. If that's your bag, you're better off waiting until Mobile World Congress or whatever. But as far as phone specific, it's hard to say what we're going to see. I had heard a rumor late last month, I think it was, that Samsung, or middle last month, that Samsung was possibly going to be showing off the S9 in some way, shape, or form at CES, which kind of sounded a little outlandish to me personally.
Yeah, that seems crazy to me. I still don't buy that.
Yeah, because that's not a Samsung thing to do. I mean, they skip really that show.
Yeah. So maybe that. I mean, and outside of that, I mean, I could branch off into other categories. But if we want to start with mobile, that's really the only thing that I've really is even on my radar. That, and possibly a little bit more education around plans for 5G, which we're kind of entering this new world order around 5G connectivity and defining what that means for all the different carriers. And I guess they have a keynote scheduled for 5G with Verizon, Qualcomm, and Baidu. So we might hear a little bit more about that, and perhaps how that might affect some of these devices and everything. I don't think you're really going to get very many big name device announcements, though.
No, for sure. What about you, Sean? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, aside from the mobile, which Jason's already touched on, I think it's going to be like it was last year, and a couple of years previous to that. CES is going to be pretty automotive focused, as it seems to have becoming an automotive.
It is,
it's
right?
crazy.
I mean, it's kind of cool in a way, because we cover mobile devices on the show, and I consider cars to be mobile devices. They're full of technology.
Oh, yeah.
They can move on their own power most of the time nowadays, even. So hey, why not, right?
Yeah. So that, and I understand that Google's going to have a big show there. So that's kind of interesting. Huh. So they're going to have a large presence, a big booth all by themselves, not partnering or teaming up with their people that vend their products through their OS and so on. So they're actually going to have stuff to show. And it might be that they have new things to show that we haven't really heard about. I'm sure there'll be tons of their home automation stuff will be everywhere, and probably partners in the booth. But I mean, will they have some new product announcements? Somebody talked maybe about Chromebooks potentially, or something new that way. I guess we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think they, in terms of their own devices, I think we're not going to see anything till the spring or fall at this point, right? I mean, Pixel 2, Pixel 2 XL, Pixel Book, Pixel Buds, Pixel, whatever that camera weird thing was. What was it called?
The Clips or whatever. Or was it Clips? Something like that.
Oh, Google Clips, Pixel Clips? Yeah. No.
Google Clip.
Google Clips.
Something like
Pixel. I like that, Sean.
Thank
that
you.
was good.
Another fun, actually, back to automotive just briefly, is that I'd read something a few days ago about Kenwood showing off a head unit that does Android Auto but wireless. Right. So that that'd be really cool. I think that'll be a neat thing. So
yeah. Are you gonna get that for your Subaru, Sean?
I probably should, Right now I have.
Yeah. What do you have right now? Do you have an AVIC of some kind?
Yeah, I have an AVIC 8000. It's really great, but it has Apple's toys, but not Android, and I'm not an Apple handset user. Speaking of more mobile stuff, Miriam, you just got an iPhone XS, however you want to call it.
I did.
So what do you think?
I did. No, don't. Sorry, that's terrible. I like it a lot. It's really nice.
Beautiful.
I just can't get used to iOS. It's the same story as always. I mean, I have to say, iOS 11 is a huge improvement. I love the hardware. I think Face ID is really, truly revolutionary. I think it's the future of authentication. I actually think that combined with voice authentication, which I think Google of anybody could do better than anyone else, to the point now where if you use Google Assistant or have a Google Home, it's able to distinguish members of your family. And I can imagine a future where, I kind of talked about this on last podcast with John Velasco, but I can see a future where you go to check out at the grocery store and there's a camera in the terminal and a microphone and using a Face ID type depth sensing system and your voice connected to like a backend like Google's, you can do secure mobile payment essentially by two-factor authentication, because you have the face authentication and the voice print authentication.
Oh, yeah.
I really think that is the thing right now, that and Face ID is really, being able to just glance at the phone in the lock screen with all the notifications and have the notifications kind of appear because it recognizes you is just magic.
Yeah,
and
that's nice.
Autofill your passwords in the web browser by just looking at the phone is also magic. But it's iOS. It's just like, I really think what I'm excited about, and the reason I got it, because I do think it's a milestone device in the sense that I've owned almost every iPhone up to the 6, and then I took a break since then because I just didn't feel there was any innovation anymore. And I feel that the iPhone 10 is finally the first iPhone in 10 years that, not 10 years, but in a number of years that really pushes the envelope. I feel that the last significant iPhone was the 5S because of Touch ID, which is the first time somebody did fingerprinting properly. I mean, remember the Atrix? It never worked very well.
Oh, man, there's
and then
blast
right? And then prior to that, I really think the iPhone 4 raised the bar for the entire industry by making a phone out of metal and glass that was like jewelry. Like all our phones are like that now. Even like a $200 Huawei Honor 7X, which is a phenomenal phone for the money, is all metal and glass. And so, we're there now, but the 4 defined that, and the 4 gave us Retina. It gave us the concept that 400 dots per inch, pixels per inch was what we needed to feel comfortable with the display, and that's spread on everything. Laptops, desktops, everybody's going 4K, 5K on bigger screens, and definitely going Retina on laptops and Chromebooks. And so to me, the 10, I needed to have one because I really feel that for the first time, Apple made an Android phone. You know what I'm saying? In terms of specs, hardware, features, it's up there with the Galaxies. I didn't feel like the 7 and the 8, well, the 8 to some extent, but I don't feel like the 7 were really competitive phones compared to what, Google and LG and Samsung had to offer. And so yeah, I'm happy, but my hesitation is because iOS. Oh.
Yeah, it's hard to get used to iOS. I mean, I've been lifelong Android user. The only time that I've lived on iOS was actually a year ago. A couple of days ago, because Megan Maroney and we were hosting Tech News Today at the time, and we did an iOS Android switch or swap for the month.
Oh my God, how did that go?
And I mean, it went really well. It was super educational, right? Like, I've spent a lot of time talking about the iPhone, but never having lived with it. It was really nice to finally get a month on it. But yeah, it's just really hard. Like, the paradigms are very different in a lot of ways. And in some ways they are very similar. In some ways they are very different. And it really just depends on, what side you fall down on as far as your big priorities. What I'm curious about with the iPhone 10 is this is not the first time that we've had some sort of face unlock. We've seen manufacturers on the Android side do this before. However, this is probably the most evolved version of
and the
a
most
face
secure
unlock.
so
And I'm
far.
wondering,
I think that's
and
the
most secure. And I think that's the big priority and the big reason why it's probably going to be, much more successful than the others. I'm curious to know how this trickles down to the competition, because Apple very often isn't the first to something, but they do something differently, perhaps better than it's been done before, and then others follow suit and go, okay, well then that's the right way to do it. So are we going to start seeing this multiple camera array system on Android devices starting next year?
I'm really hoping that that's the case for all the Android sets too going forward.
Yeah. Look, hold that thought for a second. I want to go back to one of the things you talked about before we lose it in the topic, dystopia here. 5G and automotive. I think a lot of the 5G stuff we're going to see is going to be automotive related because CES has become an auto show in many ways. But also the stuff you talked about, Baidu, Qualcomm, and what was the other company you talked about? Verizon. That has actually been kind of pre-announced already. When I was at Qualcomm's Tech Summit in Hawaii in early December, Verizon was on stage, Baidu was on stage, and there was some discussion on 5G. So I think this is kind of a broader audience version of what we were fed at that conference. But back to depth perception on cameras and Face ID. And I feel what makes Face ID unique is that it's very reliable and very secure compared to anything else we've used. Like, personally, I can't use the Galaxy S8, S8 Plus, and Note 8 retinal scan or eye scanning technology. It just doesn't work with me, but at all. I always wear glasses. I have different pairs of glasses with different prescriptions, like, for reading, for driving. It just doesn't figure me out at all. Yeah. Dumb facial recognition like we've had on Android since Nexus.
Completely useless.
Galaxy. It's terrible. It doesn't work well, and it's useless. It's you can spoof it with a photo. And what OnePlus is doing on the OnePlus 5T is a big improvement, but we know it's not as secure as Face ID. So I really do think you're right that Apple is defining the future. And we've heard very strong rumors when we were briefed by Huawei about the Mate 10, Mate 10 Pro, and then later on even further, more hints when we were briefed on that $200 Honor 7X and the V10 View 10 Honor device that's about to launch, what I think is going to be launching at CES. That device is we've already done hands-on, so it's not new per se, but all of these, they were dropping hints that none of these devices would actually have something like that, but that the next generation of Huawei devices, so maybe the P11 or the Mate 11 this year, 2018, would have a sensor that could, and a technology that would compete with Apple and be just as good. So to me, at least we got Huawei on board. I would be absolutely stunned if Samsung launched the Galaxy S9 without something that can compete with Apple here. Right.
And do you think that takes the form of multiple cameras up at the top, or is it
no?
more
It could be different.
Because
it could be different things. It has to be depth perception. There are different ways to do that. There's the Kinect way, which is what basically Apple is doing.
Two of them, right?
There's dual cameras, like dual traditional cameras, maybe one infrared, and in a sense, I guess that's what Apple is doing because they have But what Apple is really doing is they have a dedicated infrared camera that reads an array of dots that's displayed and projected on your face. So the front-facing camera, I don't think is an actual integral part of the system, like the one that takes your color photo selfies.
No, I think
that one
right.
is actually just used for like noticing that you're looking at the phone, and a bunch of other things, proximity and stuff. But I don't think so. In that part, it's part of the system, but I don't think it's part of the depth system.
That's all the infrared.
Whereas
doing that, yeah.
you could use dual cameras, like basically parallax. With one being with maybe both having infrared range so they can see at night, and then you could bathe the scene in light, not dots, but light, infrared, so they would work at night, and the parallax would read your face depth and give you an accurate face map. That would be another solution. We've also seen what the Google Pixel does with portrait photography on the back camera, the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL. They use the dual pixel autofocus system as a parallax system to read depth. So as long as you have a camera that can see your face in the dark, bathing it in infrared and picking up the infrared image, and you can do parallax, you don't need to project an array of dots. It's just the Kinect technology, essentially, that Apple has inherited by buying the company who originally designed Kinect, is pretty foolproof. And you remember how the original Kinect, how big it was. They've just miniaturized it. I would actually, my bet is that the iPhone 10 or 10, 11, next year's iPhone 10, will have depth sensing on the rear camera as well for better AR, not for authentication per se, but probably for facial recognition, so that it might be able to know who you're taking photos of for your photos library. Mm-hmm. And I think Apple will do it in such a way that won't piss too many people off for privacy, because they're very mindful of that. And
yeah, they spent a long time at the reveal talking about privacy and how they were, this print is stored on the phone. It's not stored in Apple servers or the cloud at all. So I think they're really you're right. They're very mindful about that.
I mean, as an aside, I really think that Apple cannot continue to be successful. And I want to be saying this, that if you have this impression because of my hesitation around iOS on the iPhone 10 that I'm not an Apple person, that is completely incorrect. I'm a huge Mac fan. I love my Macs, my Mac ecosystem. I just don't use Apple's cloud services because I feel that Google's are superior. And I think that what is going to, be a problem for Apple long term, if they don't get this together, is they need to compete on this cloud stuff, on this AI-based, crowdsourced data sets that make the devices more intelligent. And I know they want to do it in such a way by protecting people's privacy, and I respect that, and I want them to do that. Google tends to be a little loose on that. But at the same time, Google has never had a security breach that I'm aware of. So I continue to trust them, and I feel that every time I give them more data that I do know that they sell, at least anonymously to people, I get better features out of that. Mm-hmm. And those features far outweigh my privacy concerns. So I think this is a personal decision, but I really do believe that people who don't opt into these AI-based, cloud-based, crowdsourced data set systems like for imaging or voice
for maps,
or whatever.
This is what makes Google Maps so successful. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Those people are going to start losing out on their experiences on their smart devices in general. And then Apple is going to fall behind, at least in that area, if they aren't already, if they can't provide that level of functionality on the iPhone going forward. Because the Mac doesn't necessarily need it, but the iPhone and the iPad and the Apple Watch definitely need that stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I had another thought around Apple and its choices in the technology space. And, the thing that's been sort of buzzing the news from them is how they slow handsets based on battery age and battery performance.
Oh, yeah, that's the latest news, huh?
Yeah, that's noisy. A lot of people are really upset about it because it somehow seems so invasive that it's like Intel reaching into your computer and saying, oh, no, you have to slow you down so your performance degrades. I mean, ultimately, the reason for doing it is sane and sound. But it seems like the message around how they did it was kind of underhanded and sneaky. And this is what makes people more fearful of sharing data, stuff like this.
Yeah, they should have been more transparent.
They should have said, hey, guess what we're going to do in the future? Is your performance slow? Here, we're thinking of doing this, or this is what's going to happen in the next iOS, rather than just kind of sneakily doing it. I mean, I think ultimately for most people, it was probably not a noticeable change.
No,
right?
But I think the fact that they weren't as open as they could have been about it, certainly for Apple, who goes on and on about how transparent they want to be, it was a disappointment. And I do feel that they issued a very nice apology.
They did.
But at the same time, I feel like, I don't know, I think people are overreacting. If it wasn't Apple, they wouldn't make a fuss. And also, I find it kind of interesting that not Google, but Samsung at least issued their statement saying, we don't do that. And Moto
HTC,
did too.
Motorola, Samsung, and LG.
Yeah.
Actually.
And I'm like, what's your thought on that, Jason? Come on,
They've done it in the past though with their televisions, right? And the TV OS.
Right, but not only that, but I mean, technically engineering-wise, this is a very smart decision to slow down your phone a little bit to not have these current peaks that'll take your phone down. I doubt that they don't do it. They must do something, otherwise your phone just dies.
I like that.
Well, I think in the Android world, where at least for me, I'm so used to my phone.
Just randomly
if I held
rebooting.
on to an Android phone for 2 years, I guarantee you it would seem way less of a phone than it did the 2 years prior. Be it outdated software, be it just that hardware seems to degrade over time for whatever reason on Android devices, and batteries are a really big component of that. So seeing those announcements really just seems to me like, okay, yeah, maybe not. It's probably more semantics than anything, and it doesn't necessarily mean that your phones are magically much better after 2 years. They aren't.
No, they're not.
True.
So we used to talk about this on the podcast way back. This is a throwback thing, Miriam, with Chris and with you, is that, back then it was not about battery life. It was about thinner and thinner phones. And then it was, I mean, everybody with HTC, all of them were trying to make the thinnest phones they could. And we used to gripe saying, we'd love it if you made this phone, but give us an option for a fatter version with a bigger battery. And I still feel that's true. I think I'd be okay with another 1.5 millimeters on my Samsung S8, S7 if my battery life was proportionately that much better. I mean, the most important thing for most people is to be able to get through their day using their phone how they want to use it without having to worry, oh my God, my phone's going to shut off in 9 minutes because I haven't had a chance to plug in anywhere and charge.
Yeah, well, look, I agree, but I think that actually we've reached that point. I mean, Jason might disagree with me, but I feel that all the flagships today, last 2 days, no problem for me. I don't know what you guys do on your phones, and if on a hard day at CES is just a day, and a day is good enough.
Yeah, it has to be able to get through a day.
I mean, I don't think we need this to worry. I mean, the Galaxy S8 non-Plus is a little skimpy on life. I think the Pixel 2 non-XL is also a little skimpy, but those are small phones. And right now, I think the only phone that still have a problem that they can't do an entire day of normal use are like very rare. And the small phones usually can do a day and a half of normal use. But the big phones like my Pixel 2 XL Daily Driver, I can push to 2 days on normal use, and definitely it goes a full day at a trade show. I've done some pretty insane days with my Pixel 2 XL, and just keeps on ticking.
Man, I don't know how you're able to pull that off. I mean, I feel this way about every like flagship phone that I get on Android, is that, man, the battery's so great. I just got it and it's amazing. And the first, couple of months are awesome. And isn't it convenient that in those first couple of months, we talk a lot about our impressions and everything. So these phones have this really big reputation of having a great battery life and everything. But I mean, I'm telling you, with my Pixel 2 XL, I'm not sure what I'm doing any differently now than I was a couple of weeks ago. But now suddenly when I put it on my charging dock at the end of the day, it's at like 13-12%. Sure, I made it through the day, but guaranteed that's less performance than I was getting a couple of months ago when I first got it. And I mean, as we own these phones, we put more and more stuff on them. I don't think we realize the cruft that we end up throwing at them over time, and I think that has an effect.
I agree. You totally nailed it. I just feel I'm much better at managing what apps I keep installed, what I run in the background, and honestly, there is definitely battery degradation happening even after 3 months of my Pixel 2 XL, and so far that it's a charge cycle a day, right? Batteries are rated at 600 charge cycles. Typically, that's good ones. Maybe 1,000 charge cycles for the best ones. You're talking about, a year, 2 years of battery life if you charge every day. So be mindful of that. I think you're going to start seeing 1 or 2% loss after a month or two. But I'm just saying that out of the box, today, that wasn't always the case, that you could go easily a day on battery life on a phone.
No, I mean, the Nexus 4, it was like by just lunch it was finished.
So
maybe.
I think we're not, as much as I agree with you, Sean, it would be nice to have a few more millimeters. I feel that things have improved drastically in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I feel that I think it's a combination of better battery tech, much more efficient processors. The 10 nanometer stuff has really made a difference.
Better radios.
And I also think that, radios are more efficient, but more importantly, I think the software is like the OS are better at managing power. I think Oreo does a better job than Nougat. Nougat did a pretty decent job. And I think the iPhone is an example of how to do power management. And that's the tight integration of hardware and software, right? Like iPhones blow my mind when I see what the batteries are rated at how efficient they're able to be.
How's your iPhone 10 that way? My Sarah uses an 8, which is new to her, and she's blown away by how long the battery lasts on that. So.
It's very good. I mean, it's not as good as my 6S 6 Plus when it was new. I had a 6 Plus, which was the giant phone. And that thing now the battery's old, but back then especially compared to Android, I remember making a mental note thinking, wow, okay, Apple, well done. This is impressive. I would say it compares with that, but I hear that the iPhone 8 Plus is the champ right now. If you want the best iPhone battery life, that's the one to get. Because obviously the physical size of the battery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but look, I think for me, the other thing I want to bring up is the Moto Z, the original, came into flavors Z and the Z Force. And the Z Force was much thicker and had a much bigger battery, just like the Droid Maxes prior to that. And I think Moto has shown an interest in making phones that have, a thin version with normal battery life and a thick kind of rugged version with a bigger battery. Unfortunately, they broke that this year with the Moto Z2 Force, which is one of my most disappointing phones of the years in many ways of 2017. And I've already gone in detail at length in the podcast about it. But I just want to bring up because they kind of did the worst of both worlds. They made it thicker than the thin one because they wanted it rugged with the unbreakable glass cover. Mm-hmm. But then they made it battery life actually slightly worse than the thinnest one the year before because they just didn't follow up. And I think the argument here was a marketing argument or a sales argument or an accounting argument, which was, let's sell some battery mods. We never sold any battery mods with the Z Force last year because the battery life was so great. And if the mod ecosystem will take off, it's only if people adopt mods. So let's force them to buy mods. I think that's what they did.
Yeah.
Which is sucky, right?
Yeah. I'm not sold on the mod idea for phones. It seems to have never taken off. It's always been a gimmick, and then it disappears immediately, again and again and again.
I completely agree.
I
completely agree. And anyone that has them, I'm actually Ron Richards on All About Android. He's been using the Z2. It might be the Z2 Force actually. And he's been using a whole bevy of those mods, and while he speaks very highly of them, the question always comes back around to, okay, yes, so which ones are you using on a regular basis? Like when you get one of these mods, how it's cool when you first get it. That will always be the case when you get something new. 3 months down the line, are you still pulling that out on a regular basis, or is it just become
you
an
need
extra
an entire
accessory that you
carry all your
those
stuff? It's like between Apple dongles and mods, you need a bigger laptop bag to travel with.
I know.
Yeah.
But look, I do like the mods. I don't want you to think that because I don't like the Z2 Force specifically that I do not like the mods. I do. I think the Z2 Play is the phone to get from 2017 with mod support. The Z2 Play is a mid-ranger, but for the price, the features are better. You get a headphone jack. You actually get a better camera system. You get, in my opinion, a better quality display. You just lose out on the Snapdragon 835, and you downgrade to a Snapdragon 626 or 625 or whatever it is. But the point is, the previous gen Zs, you had the Z Play, which was also my favorite of the three, and then you had the Z and the Z Force. But the original Z was really exciting to me because not only did it bring the mods in, but it was so thin. And it was still pretty decent battery life-wise for its time. And 5mm thin phone, in that form factor, which is a pretty big phone, 5.5 inches with bezels, was wow. Like it had a wow factor to it. Even when I look at it still today, it's like, okay, it's cool. Now, it's just kind of like a gimmick, really, right? Like I'd rather have a 6 or 7mm phone like my Pixel 2 XL and have better battery life and not deal with mods, frankly. But you have to admire the fact that they made something that looked unique and special.
So Miriam, what do you think is going to define this year's phones? Look, changing topic on us here. Sorry about that.
No, that's cool. I mean, we talked about this with John last week. I think for me, it's the Face ID stuff we talked about. I really think that Huawei will have something competitive, and I think that Samsung is going to have to compete in that level. But they're also going to have fingerprint readers at the same time. So it's going to be the best of both worlds. People will be able to transition by using both for a while, and I think eventually they're just going to stop using fingerprint readers, And then depth perception on the back camera, I think, is going to be a big deal, not for authentication so much as for very, very accurate, variable aperture, like basically synthetic depth of field, and for AR, like being able to do what the Tango phones used to do with all their sensors, which, now you don't need anymore because AR Core can make sense of just what's coming out of a single camera even. But I think that the more information you can give the subsystem, the AR subsystem, whether it be, AR Core on Android or Apple's version on iOS, is going to help getting you more accurate tracking of the phone in your world. Whether that's used for AR or other things, it doesn't matter. I think that's going to become an expected set of sensor data on a phone. Like today we have temperature, proximity, light, barometer, all this other stuff that's totally built into the SoCs, right? I think we're going to see that. And there are different ways to do that. Qualcomm has shown 3 different ways to do that. Dual camera for stereo vision, like in the sense of like depth perception using parallax. We've seen dual pixel implementations of the Pixel 2 XL. There's going to be Kinect-like implementations of bathing the scene in dots of infrared and reading them back for measurement. We're going to see there's hybrid solutions. We're going to see a system that have 3 cameras in the rear, dual cameras for like parallax plus infrared for night vision and using some sort of depth sensing at night. I mean, there's all these hybrids. We're going to see dual cameras where one is a wide angle, one is a regular, one is a zoom, one is a regular, and then the third camera for depth sensing added to that, or even one with monochrome color like the Huawei, but then a third camera for depth sensing. So we're going to see a lot of things on the back of our phones. And it's going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. I think it's going to be very interesting. And
with all those things on the back of the phone, they better get rid of the fingerprint sensor, because as we know with the S8, the S8 Plus and everything, if there's any sort of confusion about where you put your finger to
I think Samsung can solve this by just putting the fingerprint reader in the right spot in the back and still have all the cluster of camera systems up there. It's no big deal.
I'm just envisioning a back of the phone that no longer is like flat with absolutely nothing. Like every part of the surface is covered with a sensor. What we might
see from Samsung is, and I want to touch on this because I think we might see from Samsung on the Galaxy S9, is some sort of Face ID clone equivalent, just as reliable and secure. Tied in with Fort Knox and all that stuff. And we might see a under-the-screen fingerprint reader that's just available if you want to use that instead. And one of the rumors for CES is that we're going to see the first phone launched ever with an under-the-screen fingerprint reader. And every little bit of rumor I've heard so far points at it being made by Vivo, which, as you know, is part of the Oppo group and the OnePlus, Vivo, Oppo empire. And that would be interesting. I think it's going to be janky and unreliable and crappy in its first gen because it's, typical Chinese manufacturer first gen stuff. But I think that the OnePlus 6 this year might inherit that technology in a more refined form factor. And as I said, if somebody can do it right out of the box, out of the gate, it's going to be Samsung or LG. So I think that would be one way. And honestly, I think we're going to see another round of Moto Z phones, a Z3, maybe a Play and a Force, and those will be 18:9 edgeless full screen phones compatible with mods. And because they won't be able to put a fingerprint reader in the front, it's either going to be under display or it's going to be on the power button on the side, like the Nextbit, the Razer, and the Sony phones.
Mm-hmm. I can't use fingerprint readers. My fingers are typically such disasters with cracking and falling apart. So
I was going to say that's because you keep building pinball machines.
Yes, it's arcade machines destroy my hands. They're cruel.
You're just a manual laborer.
Exactly. My hands are typically, some product is melting them. The skin's coming off because I'm sanding and grinding things. Yeah. So if you actually do stuff with your hands, you can find that these technologies start to fail you. Like I think my pinkies, I could probably use my pinkies, but it's not very convenient. The rest of my fingers.
Right. It's not very ergonomic. No. I've been wondering when we're going to have multi-factor in that sense. If we have a fingerprint sensor, if we have even taking like Samsung's iris technology, or even going a little bit dumber and going with just like face scanning,
kind of like the 5T, right? The 5T combines pretty decent face scanning that works at least in daylight and fingerprint, right? Mm-hmm.
And having that be a requirement both in combination. Does the 5T do that? Where you can set it to like only unlock if my fingerprint and my face match up? Because security is a really top of mind topic right now. Battery's been a very important issue, however many years. And thankfully, we've got fast charging batteries. So even if they can't improve the battery technology itself, they make it faster to top things off. So that's good. People always find faults with security. And what you're saying about Apple's, Face ID is promising, but in the meantime, if you already have the ability to do like a simple face scan, also you've got a fingerprint sensor on there. I'd love the ability to activate both, so that I can combine them and be like multi-factor. The only way I can get in here is if both of these things match, because when I pick up my phone, my finger automatically goes to that rear-facing fingerprint sensor anyways. So sure, combine them both, and now I know I'm even that much more secure. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be great. One of the things you're asking me, Sean, do I think is going to be significant is they're all going to try to match the Pixel Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL
for photography,
cameras.
right? Yeah, I've seen some of your pictures.
That's the holy grail now.
They're beautiful.
And the Mate 10 Pro was the first phone other than the Pixel 2 XL that uses some sort of AI algorithms for photography, and it's very good camera. It's also fantastic hardware specs with dual 1.6 aperture lenses, f/1.6, so really amazing camera. It's a great camera, but it's the AI features are not even in the same league as what Google is doing, and I think it's not because Huawei doesn't have the know-how in machine learning. In fact, they have a dedicated processor in the Kirin, the new Kirin 970 that does that stuff. I think it's because they don't have the data set. You see, this is where I think Apple is going to be in trouble. They don't have the data set because they don't collect data from their users because they're so worried about privacy. And I think in some cases, maybe Google over-collects stuff and maybe does abuse our privacy a little bit, even though we give them the right to. I think having a data set is critical for these kind of things to work, right? Yeah. I feel that the Pixel 2 XL camera, obviously the Pixel 2 as well, but I don't use my Pixel 2 review unit, so I don't know. But the 2 XL that I use as my daily driver has improved in imaging in the last 3 months. It's even better than when I got it. So that's because Google keeps sending new little machine learning data payloads to my phones, updating it, saying, "Hey, here's the latest."
So it improves in low light, it improves in cloudy, it improves in hazy.
The more we all take photos and save them to Google Photos, the more it scrapes the web and digitizes, and indexes images, the more the system improves. It's magic.
This is the only. See, I have an older phone now. This is the pain of not reviewing phones, is they don't show up in my door as often. So my phone, I use an older phone, and this is the only phone actually that struck me as being something I'd really like this year was the Pixel 2, not the XL. It's too huge.
I thought you had an S8.
I have an S7.
S7. Yeah. So you're about a year behind. That's still a great phone.
I love
today,
it.
though.
I mean, the battery life is very good. It's a day. I have no complaints at all about it. So the S8 is kind of the same thing again, but it breaks more often. So I think the Pixel 2 seems to be like I don't know. It's there's a handful. I really love the Motorola phones, but I've had so many break on me, and reviews I read from things this year has just been not hopeless, but not particularly fantastic either.
I mean, we did an episode, 2 episodes back now of, best phones of 2017. And for me, I think the top 5, I don't want to rehash that episode. Go listen to it, folks. It's a good one. I would say Pixel 2 XL, iPhone 10, Note 8, V30, and Huawei Mate 10 Pro. Yeah. Those are my 5.
That makes good sense. So
is that 5 or is that 6?
Where's the Pixel 2 sit in there? I guess you said you don't use it very much?
It's probably at the top for me because of the imaging, which is one of the most important things for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to top. For me, it's really hard to top the Pixel 2 XL. And,
is that your daily driver?
That's the phone that I've been using. I haven't been reviewing a phone the last month. I haven't had one in my possession to review, so I don't know what the next one will be. Maybe the ZTE Axon M, that foldable.
Oh, I have it, by the way.
Oh, you do?
It's look, it's a great idea, and the execution is interesting. Like I tell you, having more scroll real estate instantly by opening the phone is amazing. For editing photos, it's like wow, but the implementation is really sketchy and buggy. It's kind of like, remember how the pen, the S Pen, was really janky in the early days.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then once Android started using cursor and pen input support natively, it just got better after that. It's the same deal. I think this needs to be incorporated in the OS in some way to make it viable. And But it's interesting you bring it up because there is very strong rumors, and I don't think we're going to see that at CES. We might see a prototype on a slide on a screen, but there's really strong talk of Samsung releasing a folding phone this year that has a folding display, and then obviously we're going to need some sort of mode where if it's folded, it only uses one half of the display. If it's unfolded, it uses the full display, which is kind of what the Axon M does, but it does it with 2 displays and a little bezel in between.
Right.
It's a very interesting phone. If you have an AT&T contact or ZTE contact, I would recommend you get your hands on one just to kind of experience it. But I cannot recommend that phone to people. It just would be, you have to be super nerdy. It's expensive, and more importantly, it's outdated. It's Snapdragon 821. The screens are 69. They're not really high quality screens. The camera is very meh. I mean, compared to even like a mid-range Moto G5 Plus or, like a OnePlus 5 or 5T, it's not even in the league of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They spent all their time developing the screens, and the processor they spec'd for it was probably way. I mean,
it's an A21. It's A21, but it's like a year and a half old, right? Like it's not bad, but it's not like, it just doesn't feel like a flagship in many ways. It feels like a mid-ranger with two screens that is a bit janky software-wise. You know what I'm saying?
It definitely seems one of those devices in a catalog where it's like, we did it purely because we knew we could be one of the first ones to do it, and we get a little bit of attention, kind of a proof of concept sort of thing. I'm curious about it purely from that standpoint, not because it like solves any actual need that I have. But years ago, Sony had the Sony Tablet P, and I don't know if you remember that one.
I remember, yeah.
It was like a rounded clamshell that opened up, and you had two screens, one on the top, one on the bottom. And I reviewed it. I hated that device. It was so bad, and I think part of that goes back to what you're talking about. This isn't like a form factor that is implemented in some sort of standardized way inside of Android, so that leaves it up to the OEM, the manufacturer, to figure out how to like cram it in there and sandwich it in there. I think the challenge for Samsung, if they're doing a truly foldable display that, the display itself is folding over, is that I feel like we've seen some of these prototypes before, and when they flatten out, that bend in the screen ends up becoming kind of a dimple area. It kind of puckers almost, and no one wants their display to pucker. And also, pucker's not a word that should ever be applied to a display.
Remember the Galaxy Note Edge? A bit like they just wanted to show that they could make a plastic OLED screen that kind of waterfalled on the side, right? Yeah. And they did, but it was so awkward to use. Useless. There was really no point to it. And then with the Galaxy S6, was it the 6 Plus or the 6, whatever it was, the one that they showed, look, if you do just a little bit of waterfalling, a bit of edge roundness, then we don't really actually have to have the edge features. It just becomes like a gimmick. Yep. And a cool looking screen. And that's basically what the 7 inherited, and the 8 and the Note 8. It's become
their language, yeah.
And it becomes their language. And I think people like it because it really does make the screen look even more edgeless, right? Because of the slight curve at the edge. So I think that, it's going to be like that. They're going to start off doing something, and we're all going to roll our eyes. It's going to be a bit of a disaster. And then Gen 2 is going to be awesome, But somebody's got to bring it on. Somebody's got to make the first folding phone.
There's also the whole form factor thing that a lot of people aren't interested in a device that you need to work two hands to get using, unless.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing about the Axon M, is that you can use one hand, because when it's folded, it's just a regular phone. Only one display is active. But when you unfold it, obviously you've double the real estate. It's almost as big as an iPad Mini in terms of screen real estate.
For screen reading or for reading books and for watching a film or
editing photos, for it's amazing. Watching YouTube videos is like, wow. I mean, it really makes a difference, but it's hard to justify all the other compromises. And the fact that it's an Axon, meaning, it's ZT. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Actually, the Axon 7 was a phenomenal phone. So it's not like they miss every time. It's just that it could be more polished. Like Huawei has finally reached a place where, like 2 years ago, I would be like, Huawei UI experience, not so good. Hardware is phenomenal, but blah, blah, blah. I feel now I can pack up a Mate 10 Pro or a P10, P10 Plus, and be like, okay, wholeheartedly, you can use this phone. You will not feel like the skin's going to get in your way. You know what phone totally disappointed me because of the software and the skin got in the way? Was the Mi Mix 2. Phenomenal hardware from Xiaomi, edgeless display on 3 sides, ceramic back, I mean, superb hardware. But the software is such a disaster. It's unfreaking usable. And even if you skin it, everything is just a mess still. Like, it's just like, no. So, Keep that in mind. And that's why we haven't seen Xiaomi come into the US yet, because everybody wants Xiaomi to come to us because we all love their hardware. But until they give us plain Android or very lightweight skin or learn like Huawei did and LG, remember how bad LG used to be and how nice it is comparatively?
Samsung too was pretty.
Yeah.
Oh, Samsung is probably the most reformed one of all. I feel like.
And their hardware.
The Galaxy.
Remember how bad their hardware was? We used to joke saying, stop making, because this is when iPhone, the 5 was around and they're beautiful in glass and metal. And we used to say the same thing, like, come on with these plastic, like bendy plastic, horrible. The chrome, the chrome would wear off on your plastic so it'd show white.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it was so disgusting. I remember that.
And they turned a corner though. So, I mean, all of these folks can do it. Once they fill their...
Yeah. I mean, in terms of hardware, though, they've all turned the corner. I mean, Huawei makes gorgeous phones. Xiaomi makes... I would argue that Huawei and Xiaomi make prettier phones than Apple and Samsung, hardware-wise. And spec-wise, they're unbelievably packed. But the software, and Huawei is definitely getting there. LG has finally gotten there. The V30, to me, is one of my top 5 from last year, LG V30, and it's the most underrated phone.
It's one you don't hear about.
A long shot. It's a phenomenal phone. Like, I cannot recommend that phone more. If you love photography and audio in particular, if you're an audiophile and you want the best audio implementation for headphones on any phone ever in the history of mankind, humankind, womankind, this is the freaking phone for you. Yeah.
Yeah. What's it about? Something about a friend was going on about this. Something with the DAX, right?
Oh yeah, it's an incredible dedicated DAC headphone amp made by ASS, which is like a super high-end audiophile company.
It's the worst name ever, though, unfortunately for them.
It is. But once you listen to it, there's no going back. It's just like, oh my goodness, it's good. Have you played with that phone, Jason?
I will admit, of all the flagships last year, the LG V30 got very little. Like, I got very little time with it, and so as a result, I end up not thinking about it in these regards. But I know, you've been on a number of times, and you've definitely brought it with you, and I know that you speak very highly of it. I feel like it's. Sometimes LG phones seem to fly under my radar for whatever reason. I'm not. I mean,
in many ways, it is a Pixel 2 XL prototype.
Yeah.
I mean, but they removed all the good audio stuff, and the cameras are very different. I think the Pixel 2 XL camera is ultimately better, not because of its hardware specs, but because of its AI features. But in terms of pure numbers and like if you look at the specs, the V30 camera is killer. I mean, f of 1.6, and you get that super wide angle, which is super fun to play with. I frankly prefer that to the zoom lens we have on the Note and on the iPhone 10. I find it much more useful to be able to do super wide angle at trade shows. You can like Sean, you would dig this. You can go to a car show and be right in front of a car, literally 2 feet from the door of a car, and take a perfect shot of the side of a car.
That's crazy.
Right.
And that's how how these shows work, right? You're inches from whatever you're trying to shoot.
Yeah, you know how it is. If you don't want people in your shot, you're screwed, right? You'll wait forever if you just line yourself up like about 2 or 3 meters away, right? So yeah, it's interesting. But back to CES, I think that there might be some surprise around Galaxy S9 or around the folding Samsung phone. So the Samsung press conference is definitely one to watch out for. And then I would say that let's see what this alleged potential Vivo phone, or at least whatever phone it is with a fingerprint reader embedded in the screen, brings us. And Huawei is going to officially launch that V10 View 10 Honor. It's basically a Mate 10 for half the price with almost the same specs. It's and it's sold as an Honor, which is their kind of not budget, but they're more accessible price brand. And I think it's going to be an awesome phone. I mean, I've played with it, so I know. But because it's not on embargo or anything, we all got a chance to do a hands-on in San Francisco in November. But I think it's going to become official. Yeah. So that's what we're definitely going to see at CES.
Can I make one prediction about CES?
Go for it.
We're going to see lots of really unnecessarily smart things.
Yes.
Oh my God! No, it's already
Internet
the case.
I know it's already the case, but now I feel like this is the year where it's like, smart has been a buzzword. People are getting in on the smart home thing with the home assistants.
Oh man,
is
that ever a crazy thing this year? We'll talk about that after.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're already seeing these really ridiculous, like smart coffee mugs, smart hairbrushes, smart forks.
Guess what I got today?
Now I think we see everyone, all the Chinese manufacturers going, this is what people want. And I mean, they're going to be everywhere. That's
this morning alone, I got a pitch for a smart couch. It's a couch, has an embedded touchscreen in it.
Wow.
And the armrest. I'm like, what about taping an old iPhone to my couch? Does that make it a smart couch?
Theo would love that, to have a couch with duct tape on it.
Yeah. I'm sure he would. You know that he would. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a bit over the top. And in my consulting, I help a lot of these companies. I advise them and I always tell them, it's like, look, if you're trying to reinvent something that doesn't need to be reinvented, you're failing. It's like, we do not need a smart kettle. There's this thing in a kettle that beeps naturally when the steam goes through it to tell you it's done.
Mm-hmm. You don't need a notification on your phone.
What would be cool is if your stove heard the sound and automatically turned off the gas or the electric at that point. But your kettle itself does not need to be smart. The fact that it already whistles works just like better than phone notifications or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth that will break the first time you forget about it and put it in the dishwasher,
I find that
we're already being notified to death in our lives. Imagine a world where every single item in your house is actually very smart. And imagine the noise that you have to deal with in that reality. It's just not necessary, in my opinion.
Smart slow cookers and things like this. I mean, I use sous vide a lot. I cook a lot, and the sous vide has it has remote features, and I have never once used them because you go to the thing, you put it in the water, you set a temperature, you say start, and you're done. Like there's no need for you ever to worry about. Oh no, is it still 147? Oh, yeah, it is. Good. Like it's not something I'm in my basement worrying about. Is it still 147? Because I know it is. It is every other time I've ever used it. It's never going to slip. And this is a Christmas thing. Is Google made, in Canada anyway, the price of their Mini $39 at Christmas up here. And I'm assuming in the States.
Yeah, that's good.
And it became like a runaway hit somehow. So I was in a Best Buy. I leisurely picked one up for myself, and I said I'll get a couple for the kids later in the shopping season.
You bought a 6-pack like beer.
Yeah, exactly. You needed it. And then I went back, and there were none. Like the store was covered with them. Every bin had them, and then they were gone. And everybody I know now has these things. So I think you're right, Jason. You touched on this, the home automation stuff and the smart home stuff is going to be exploding at CES. I think that's going to be a huge conversation. I think Google's booth, whatever it's going to be like, is probably going to be filled with partners and that kind of stuff surrounding their home automation. More great Samsung smart fridges, I expect.
Oh, it never is a bad. Like if there's no smart fridges from LG or Samsung, it's a bad show.
That's right. They have to be. I want a smart home sauna. That's what I want.
Oh, yeah. My favorite is last year, 2 years ago, a while back, LG introduced the smart clothes folder. You throw your clothes in this closet thing after you did laundry, right? After you out of the dryer, and it folds them.
I would like that, actually. What? That would be useful.
It's insane. It's basically a folding robot in a little closet.
That's the cool stuff. Is mechanical, clever things like that are always really wonderful at shows like this.
You know what I love about this is I think being in my late 40s, it's like I was, when I was a kid in the 70s, they promised us the moon. Mm-hmm. Well, we got the moon. They promised us Mars. We didn't get it. They promised us flying cars. We didn't really get it, but we got drones instead.
We got communication. That's what it was. It wasn't about transportation.
I mean, we were promised all this stuff. So I get really excited when it's like, completely unnecessary things like that are like, super mechanically complex because I'm like, somebody is engineering this
like
stuff.
Like a VCR.
And I know, it's insane. It's great. But
it's old, but if you take them apart, they're terrifying inside. It's unbelievable that somebody decided that this would make a sensible consumer electronics product, a really expensive one, and you couldn't put more moving parts in any appliance in your home than a VCR had. Like if you take one apart,
at the time,
it was unbelievable.
It's insane.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah. And it became a commodity to the end. You could buy a VCR for $100, and it was super complex, but at the same time, super commodified. So, but this LG folding whatever robot thing it's kind of amazing to see in action. They always have at their booth, and I don't think it's a commercial product yet, but it's definitely. Eventually, we're going to have some sort of closet that we throw our dirty laundry in, and at the other end, it comes out folded,
and
right?
hanging for you.
That would be nice.
It would be very convenient.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to do laundry.
It's like an assembly line washing system in your house rather than having a washer and dryer to deal with. What else? I mean, what else do you think we're gonna? I mean, of course, a lot of automotive announcements, a lot of autonomous 5G,
tied together,
all that goodness. Smart appliances. I'm not talking about like the little gadgets from China that are stupid. I'm talking about like big brands like Samsung, LG, Westinghouse, whatever, Whirlpool. To me, those are kind of, I don't need them, but they're fun. Yeah. Like I always kind of go, like toaster ovens with touch screens.
Yes.
And, like, big ovens with touch screens.
I want to know what like the products I always find interesting are like things that Nest does, So they take some sad little thing from your home and they make it wonderful again, like a thermostat or a smoke detector or, so what is going to be next in that world? I think that those kinds of things are always fun at these shows as well. Can you think of anything that you've heard of or that like those kinds of products I think are the best.
The next, I think Alexa in many ways or Google Home, so Echo or Alexa equipped devices or Google Assistant equipped devices like Google Home, I think are going to be the catalyst that's going to make home automation really a thing because they are the universal interface, right? You have to have it today to be competitive. So you can have other ecosystems. You can have Nest thermostat and a Nest smoke detector. You can have Philips Hue in every other room. You can have smart things in another room because you started with that and then you gave up on it. And they all talk to each other through Alexa or Google Assistant. And to me, that is actually progress because we now have a unified interface that's super easy. Anyone knows how to talk to something, right? So, and it works. It's actually, I use a lot of home automation through Amazon actually, mostly right now, because I find my Google Assistant doesn't support a lot of my ecosystems yet.
Alexa just arrived here. Amazon is like really a month ago. Or maybe not even.
It's amazing. Really? For home automation, it really ties it all together in the most incredible way. And I think that's the revolution. I don't think it's any specific product anymore because vertical ecosystems in that field are doomed, right? I think that we still need a solution for lighting and lights in the sense that I think the ideal solution is if you could retrofit every light switch in your house, not the outlets, but the light switches, in a kind of very simple way, with something that can be automated, then the first company that does this really well, and there's been many attempts, but nobody's really pulled it off yet, I think is going to be the winner in that area because that one is still really broken.
It is. And the stopgap seems to be bulbs, right, that are aware and smart. But then you end up with these wall switches that eventually houses aren't even going to have anymore. You end up with a wall switch that you just leave on all the time because you're talking to the bulbs. There was an interest. I was in conversation with the people from Ecobee. It was in the fall.
Yeah, the thermostat.
Right. And so they had some neat, interesting home automation stuff. We never went anywhere with our discussions, but there's a company that makes controllable louvered vents for your rooms. So So they would talk to Ecobee, and these have rechargeable batteries in them. So you have their idea, and it exists, is that as you walk around your house, at least up here, depends on obviously how you're doing your heating and cooling. But as you walk around your house, this bubble of warm air is following you around. So as you leave a room, the sensor says, okay, hey, this motion has left the room. There's no one here anymore. So the louvered vents in your living room, for example, will close. And then you go into the kitchen and maybe the louvered vents open up in the kitchen. So it's an active sort of heat management system. But there's also the concept of having, behaviors as they learn. So, it starts to figure out, hey, at 10 o'clock, Sean goes to bed. So maybe at 9:55, the vents in your room open to heat or to cool your room more, and the spaces you're in start to shut as you get ready to leave them. And I think those kinds of things are going to be like really, really powerful for people, and especially when you can. If you can picture it, you can walk up to a heating vent in your living room, you can pull that grate out of the floor, drop a new one in, and that bit's done. So from a consumer standpoint, it's super easy. It's that, and it has to be
I helped a Ukrainian company launch a product this year called Solar Gaps, which are basically blinds. They're smart blinds, so they do the same thing. They open and close and track the sun to adjust to minimize, like it's for use in hot climates, like think Israel, anything around the Mediterranean, Middle East, and maybe like the southern states, like Arizona and New Mexico. Basically, it knows when you're not in a room, and it shuts the blinds. It tracks the sun to like let enough light in, but not basically the purpose is to decrease your air conditioning bill, right? By optimizing. And it's really cool because they put solar panels on the outside of the blinds. So they're harvesting energy at the same time, not just to power the blinds, but to actually feed to your grid, right? So, and if you have enough window area in the sun in your house, it's a more cost-effective way potentially than doing solar panels.
Interesting.
Right? Now, it's very Gen 1, so of course, but can you imagine as this technology matures and improves and miniaturizes, now you have, as you said, a house that's really, truly smart. It knows where the people are in the house. It knows the sun, the environment it's in. It can adjust the louvers, the blinds, open and close windows to get natural air flow. It can close windows when the air quality gets bad, like when we had all these fires up here in northern in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh man, yeah.
Or in California for that matter. And all that stuff. And I think that to me, it's the integration of all of it. I think so far only really Google Assistant and Alexa-based systems have been able to kind of tie it all together in this.
That's it, and like you said earlier, Miriam, those are a stopgap. So the Google Home Mini is like, just imagine you peel off that shell, put it in any device in your home, in a light switch, in a whatever, so that no matter where you are in your house, you can speak to it and without having to worry about, where's my Google Home microphone. What kind of automation do you have at home, Jason? Do you have anything?
Yeah, well, so actually, as of this Christmas, every single room in our house has a Google Home of some sort, and that was probably one of the best. We have a 7 and a 4-year-old. 4-year-old daughters. That was one of their favorite gifts was Google Home Minis for their room, because that's how they play music. That they enjoy music with their voice in the other room, so now they can listen to it in their room and they love it. So that's kind of the interface. And then we've got Hue light bulbs throughout the house. We've got Hue light switches because I hate controlling my lights with an app on my phone. Like that's just not ever going to be the thing I want to do. Instead, we have the light switches that work within the Hue universe so that I can program different profiles just based on how many times I hit on. And that works wonderfully for us. And so, we've got that. And, outside of that, we've got a Honeywell thermostat that, that connects into Google Home. But I never use Google Home to control that. It's on a schedule. I appreciate smart home, and I appreciate the promise of it. It would be really nice. Like I was watching Black Mirror last night. It'd be really nice to walk through my home and have my lights follow me just based on my motion and everything like that. Except I just fear that things get a little too smart. They get a little too predictive. And we see this on phones all the time where it's like, this phone learns how you use
I kind of hate that too.
Things and surfaces the right thing at the right time. It never does. It doesn't. I mean, it's always confusing because there's never any persistence to anything. So I'm down with smart home, but I want to be able to control how smart it actually is, because if it's full on automation, like I feel like that would just be far too confusing for me. Maybe I'm old school. I don't know.
I'm with you about the kids.
No,
my kids think that the same thing. They got Google Home Minis. Well, unfortunately, they're still in the mail from Google, and that's their favorite gift. My son is 11, my daughter's 10, and they spend all their time just kind of talking to it now, trying to get it to tell. If you ask it, what does the fox say? They find that's just the best thing ever, because it replies with the chorus from the song, and then she says,
"That's fantastic.
That's what I've been told." It's excellent.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Well, there's freeze dance.
Yes.
So if they decide they want to play freeze dance, they just say play freeze dance, and boom, music. It launches right into the game. But man, for music, and that's where I realized like Google was really smart to reduce it to. Here in the US, it was $29 for the Mini, and depending on where you got it, you'd end up getting like a $10 or $15 gift card for that store also. So it was ridiculously low. And something like music is a perfect example of how this device can do a million things, but if you find the one thing that people will connect with, then suddenly that one thing is very useful to that person. That's the reason that they got it, but it opens up to this whole other world of other things that maybe not now, but maybe eventually those people will be open to or understand why they need to use that for that purpose.
I just wish the last topic on the Minis, I just wish there was an audio jack on that thing. Because having to have a Chromecast plugged into something to use the audio is, to me, I don't know, it's just such a grab.
So the Echo Dot the Echo Dot, Amazon's tiny one, has a headphone jack, which is
that's fantastic. See, that's a reason.
So there is
for me
a
to
mod.
buy.
Somebody modded the Google Home, like took it apart and did it.
But it's mono, sadly.
But I agree. Does it work with Bluetooth? Does it support Bluetooth speakers? I've never tried.
The only thing it supports is Chromecast. So Chromecast audio or Chromecast, either one. It will work.
Yeah. I mean, you can Bluetooth your phone or whatever into it as it.
Yeah, no, I get that.
As a Bluetooth source, but you
can't.
It's
the Max.
Out of it.
I haven't even heard. Have either of you folks played with the Max?
Oh, actually, that's on my list of things I'm using.
No, that's the one I haven't touched. Yeah, I haven't touched it either.
I've been testing it for the past couple of weeks, and it is a loud, booming system. I mean, that thing sounds really, really good. It's it's $400, so there's no denying like this is an expensive Google Home. But that's where from a music standpoint, if you appreciate this type of device specifically because of music, then maybe $400 makes sense to you. For me, it makes a lot of sense. I don't own it. I'm just borrowing Leo's because he got it and let me play around with it. But we just got our backyard done and we have this whole space out there, and I would love to get speakers out there. But now in this new kind of paradigm, instead of having to like control music on my phone and send it to speakers, or having a central stereo in the living room that channels a speaker out to the deck, I want something like a Google Home Mini, because when I'm out there, I just want to say, hey, play this, and it does it, And so for that purpose, it's a great device. But $400 is going to turn a lot of people away. I think it just depends on what
so
how you
I
view
think
it.
The big winner this year in that sense is Sonos, because they were kind of in a way a dying company, because they're very vertical, very narrow ecosystem. What maintained them for many years is that they really had the easiest integration with all these other devices, and they were really high quality. Yeah. But you can only go so far with that. After 14 years, they needed the magic spark to get back in business. And the Sonos One, the new one, which has built-in
is that the little one?
Microphones. It's the entry-level one. It's the only one they make that has built-in microphones, and that one supports both Alexa and Google Assistant.
Very smart.
So they're integrating with all the systems, and you can just ask it whichever assistant you want on this, and it comes out of the same speaker. And if you have a single Sonos One in the Sonos system, the new one with the microphones, it works for all of your speakers in the entire house. And if you have Echo Dots and Google Homes, it can use those as auxiliary microphones, at least for their respective ecosystems.
That's clever.
So it's very cool how they've kind of taken their strength, which was, be very universal, and the sound quality advantages they have, and the fact that they have the best wireless synchronization, the best, multi-room wireless audio, and leveraged all this new stuff that everybody else does well. But now you're no longer stuck in a single ecosystem. And to me, they're the winner this year in terms of audio speakers, because they sound great. And you can use your assistant of choice, and it integrates with all the good Sonos stuff. So if you have legacy Sonos, all of a sudden you have Alexa and Google Assistant. It's great.
Yeah, that's exactly what I need, and the price is reasonable too. Interesting.
Yeah. It's not
I
bad.
need to know.
So,
I need to know a Google representative up here in Canada to talk to about checking out.
Yeah,
the
you need to make friends with Google PR. That's exactly the. Yeah. So one last thing I wanted to say. You were talking about trends for 2017 for 2018. Oh my God, for phones. We talked about the cameras. We talked about the AI stuff. AI is going to be huge on phones. Depth perception is going to be huge. Meeting up the performance of the Pixel 2 XL is going to be a goal for a lot of phones. But I think the big defining thing that we know for sure is going to happen on every single phone this year, even mid-rangers and low-end phones, is 18:9 edgeless displays. Yes! And that...
What do you think of the trade-off that Apple had to make with the 10 for that, with that cutaway? Does it bug you? Do you notice it?
No, I also have an essential phone, the phone from Andy Rubin, and also has a cutout for just the camera. And honestly, you quickly forget it's there. On the iPhone, it's obviously more obvious. And when you do landscape viewing of videos on the iPhone in particular, it's really obvious. But frankly, it doesn't bother me that much. I think that, basically I support the idea of a phone that is almost all screen. And I think there's going to be somebody who makes a phone that is completely all screen. And when they do that,
I think with a thin OLED, that if you could just shut off one corner of the screen for a millisecond while those cameras work, the user might not even notice
and
it,
that's,
right?
And that's exactly what the under the screen fingerprint reader tech, of course that doesn't shut off a part of the screen for it, but I can imagine a technology that's similar where the sensors are under the screen and they shut off those pixels just briefly to take the photo. And that's the future, but I don't think we're quite there yet. It's just going to happen. It's just, maybe Xiaomi will be the first one since they did the first edgeless, 3 sides edgeless phone, right? So that was the original Mi Mix 2 years ago now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It's going to be a fun year. Hopefully we get the chance to do this again too this year. We can catch up on all these topics and see if we're right or wrong.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to have you on again, Sean, and Jason as well. Speaking of what, we should probably wrap it up. It's been an hour and 10 minutes. I would love to start maybe with Sean. Tell us where people can find you online, and also, if I know you do a lot of restoration of arcade cabinets and pinball machines. Do you have like a website or anything right now where people can see your progress?
It's Twitter and Instagram, though. I barely use Instagram. Twitter's @Sean_Cooper. My arcade collecting is unfortunately it's one of those hobbies that takes up a huge amount of time and a huge amount of space because they're giant. And
I love seeing your photos on Facebook.
Yeah, they're fun.
It's amazing.
This morning, actually, I was cleaning up a Neo Geo 4 slot to bring in because I'm having friends over on the 6th for sort of a late New Year's Eve party. So I want to make sure the games are all behaving themselves. Some good fighting games.
Right on.
Nice.
Cool. And you said Sean_Cooper on Twitter. And of course, they can find you writing on Engadget from time to time. You contribute occasionally. Yeah. Great. Jason, where can people find you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find, just on Twitter @Jason Howell. If you guys want to check out some of the shows that I do here for Twit, you can check out All About Android. Of course, Miriam, you've been on a number of times. We're gonna have you back here soon.
Thank you.
Have you up to the studio, and so All About Android, twit.tv/AAA, and then also Tech News Weekly, which is just like a weekly interview show that I do with Megan Maroney. We bring 3 or 4 different news breakers on and talk to them about some of the bigger, sometimes more interesting stories from the week that you haven't heard a lot about. So we're having fun with that format as well.
Sweet. Do you want to plug Yellow Gold as well?
Oh, well, I certainly can. I just finished a successful Kickstarter for a new album. I'm also a musician when I'm not full-time everything else, parent, technology, podcaster.
Aren't we
Who
all?
knows how we find the time to do the things that we do, but it's my passion. So I've got a new album coming out sometime in the next couple of months. The Kickstarter was successful. I'm super happy about that. So just go to yellowgoldmusic.com, and more information will hit there once it's ready to release. I'm guessing probably something like February.
Cool. What kind of music is it?
It's primarily it's guitar oriented, sometimes acoustic, sometimes a little bit noisier than that. But kind of along the indie shoegaze. A lot of it's pretty mellow, sometimes little loud moments. You can go on there. There's some of my previous album work is there as well if you want to kind of get a taste for it. But been having a lot of fun with it, and I'm just happy to do it whether I release music or not. It's my passion.
So go support Jason, folks.
Cool.
Thank you, Miriam. And thank you, Sean. It was really nice to meet you.
Both.
Yeah, thanks for both being on the show. A real pleasure. It's my first show where I've had 2 guests for the entire duration of the show. I've had guest execs come on either by phone or in person when I had at conferences in hotel rooms to kind of give us a lowdown on maybe a big announcement they had. But this is the first time where it's truly just 3 tech journalists talking about nerding out about tech for an hour. So
good fun.
I'm enjoying it. It's a little bit more challenging to manage in terms of resources, but I love it, and I'm glad we did it for the first week of 2018. So thanks for being on again. Thank you. You guys know where to find me. I'm at TNKGRL on Twitter. That's Tankgirl, like the comic book without the vowels. Remember, there is a YouTube channel that kind of goes with the podcast. So when I talk about a device and you want to see it physically, I usually have some sort of unboxing or review. It's on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Miriam Joire. That's my full name, Miriam with a Y, spelt out. And so subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube, like the videos, all that good stuff. And remember, if people don't know where this podcast lives, it's on iTunes and on Pocket Casts. But if you forget, it's just mobiletechpodcast.com. And then you find the RSS feed there and you can go from there. So subscribe and join us next week. We'll have probably maybe 2 podcasts next week because I'll be live at CES. And so tune in for that. Thanks again, folks. Bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.